In Washington, D.C., the capital of the United States, the streets tell two very different stories. On one side, there is power, prestige, and politics, the White House, Congress, and the monuments that symbolize democracy and freedom. Tourists visit in awe, inspired by the grandeur of America's history. But on the other side, hidden behind the shining image, lies a darker and more painful reality. A crisis that eats away at families, neighborhoods, and entire communities. It is the crisis of drug addiction, and it is silently tearing apart the very heart of the nation's capital. The story of drug addiction in Washington, D.C. did not begin overnight. Decades ago, the city was at the center of America's so-called war on drugs. Crack cocaine devastated entire neighborhoods during the 1980s and 1990s, leaving a lasting scar on the city's people. Many who grew up during those years remember how families were shattered, how prisons filled with young men, and how children were forced to grow up without parents. While times have changed, the shadows of that era still linger. Today, a new drug has taken its place: opioids, especially fentanyl, which is far deadlier and far more addictive than anything the city has seen before. The numbers are alarming. Every year, hundreds of lives are lost to overdoses in Washington, D.C. Fentanyl, just a few grains of which can kill, is now mixed into street drugs without warning. Someone may think they are buying heroin, cocaine, or even a pill, but what they are really buying is a death sentence. Emergency rooms are overwhelmed, and first responders carry Narcan, the only hope to reverse an overdose, everywhere they go. For paramedics in the city, reviving someone from the edge of death has become routine, but so has the heartbreak of arriving too late. Walk through neighborhoods like Anacostia, or look under bridges and alleys near downtown, and you will see people whose lives have been consumed by addiction. Some are homeless, their belongings packed in small bags, their faces lined with years of pain. Others are young professionals who once had stable jobs and bright futures, but fell into the trap of dependency. Addiction has no boundaries. It crosses race, class, and age. It affects the homeless man on the corner, the mother raising children alone, the veteran struggling with trauma, and the teenager experimenting for the first time. Behind every addict is a story. Stories of broken trust, of lost dreams, of battles fought in silence. Some began with prescription opioids, given after surgeries or injuries, only to find themselves dependent on pills they could no longer afford. Others turned to drugs to numb the scars of trauma, abuse, or poverty. Many simply wanted an escape, a way to silence the noise of a hard life in a city that often forgets its most vulnerable. But what starts as relief quickly turns into a prison, one that holds the body and mind captive. The effects of this epidemic ripple far beyond the individuals who suffer. Families are torn apart as loved ones watch helplessly, unable to pull their sons, daughters, brothers, or mothers back from the edge. Children are placed in foster care because their parents are lost to addiction. Neighborhoods struggle with crime, poverty, and instability as drugs take root. Employers lose workers, communities lose leaders, and the entire city pays the price in healthcare costs, law enforcement, and social services. Addiction is not just a personal struggle, it is a public crisis that affects everyone. And yet, society often responds with stigma instead of support. Addicts are judged, rejected, and dismissed as failures. Too often, they are treated as criminals rather than human beings in need of medical help. Prisons overflow with non-violent drug offenders who never received proper rehabilitation. The truth is, addiction is a disease that requires treatment, compassion, and understanding. But without access to affordable rehab centers, mental health care, and long-term support, recovery feels like a distant dream for many in Washington, D.C. Still, there is hope. Across the Capitol, people are fighting back. Outreach workers walk the streets, distributing clean needles and life-saving medication to prevent overdoses. Nonprofit organizations open shelters, providing food, warmth, and counseling. Recovery programs offer addicts a second chance, reminding them that no one is beyond saving. And perhaps most powerful of all, former addicts, those who have walked the darkest roads, are now guiding others toward recovery, proving that healing is possible. Their voices carry weight because they know the pain and they know the way back. But this is not a battle that charity alone can win. Real change requires commitment from leaders and lawmakers. It requires a healthcare system that prioritizes rehabilitation over punishment. It requires schools to educate children about the dangers of drugs before they fall into the trap. It requires breaking the cycle of poverty, trauma, and neglect that feeds addiction generation after generation. Washington, D.C. is a city of influence. The policies made here ripple across the entire nation. And if the capital cannot solve this crisis within its own streets, what message does that send to the rest of America? This epidemic is not just about drugs. It is about humanity. Every addict is someone's child, someone's parent, someone's friend. Their lives are worth saving, and their recovery is possible, but only if society chooses to see them not as statistics or criminals, but as human beings in need of help. The monuments of Washington, D.C. stand tall as symbols of freedom, justice, and equality. It is time for those ideals to extend beyond politics and reach the people who are crying out for help in the shadows of those same monuments. The story of drug addiction in Washington, D.C. is the story of America itself, a story of pain, resilience, and the constant struggle between despair and hope. It forces us to ask difficult questions. How can the most powerful nation in the world allow such suffering in its own capital? How many more lives must be lost before the crisis is treated with the urgency it deserves? And what kind of future can we build if an entire generation is left to fade away in silence? The answers will not come easily, but they must come, because until they do, the streets of Washington, D.C. will remain a painful reminder that power and progress mean nothing if a nation cannot protect its own people. This is not just a local problem. This is not just a story for the capital. This is America's fight, and the time to act is now.